What is up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. This is going to be another album review for a 2021 release. I'm going to be reviewing the brand new studio album from the band Genghis Tron, entitled Dream Weapon. Now this is their third studio album in their discography, and this is their first album in more than 10 years. And apparently I have not been very familiar with this band whatsoever. But since a lot of people have done reviews on this album, and especially the album's cover art did intrigue me to check out this album, I decided to give this album a shot, and I was in the forefront of repeating the album multiple times because this was actually one of my very big surprises of any album that I have listened to throughout this year so far, just like with Dread Sovereign's Alchemical Warfare. Now this is their latest album to be released through the record label of Relapse Records, and Kurt Ballou did the production for this album. For those that don't know this band, Genghis Tron are originally more or less an extreme mathcore complex style of metal band, but this album, Dream Weapon, is by far the most different album they've ever put out in terms of the music. The material that's on this album totally erases what the previous two albums had sounded like. And I'll have to say, with more of these multiple listens, Dream Weapon has been a massive connection to me, and without question, one of my favorite albums of 2021. What you get on the instrumentation side of this album is pretty much the most experimental style album, with music that has been, in my opinion, really adventurous. And what I love a lot about this album, this takes me into some adventurous journey, and this has some incorporations on a lot more of the electronic and ambient synthesizer all over throughout the album. But when we go into a lot of the deeper dives into the music, you hear a lot more of the progressiveness, and there is a lot of that post-metal, prog metal style of sound, with an incorporation on one of my favorite genres, which is shoegaze. And I can definitely hear a lot of these various sounds that remind me of other bands. The ambient synthesizer extra additions to the music reminds me on something like on a Tangerine Dream kind of atmospheric approach, like on some of their 1970s output of their albums, or to something like maybe a Brian Eno album or an Ashra album, or maybe even Steve Roach. But when we go into some of the drumming passages on this record, like on the track of Pyrocene and Single Black Point, and some of the other tracks that are so diverse with a lot of these textures, the drumming on the album is so rhythmic and completely intriguing, with so much of the versatility. And some of the drumming does make me think of another drummer, which is Bram Dayler, of how direct and creative these beats really are. And some of the guitar elements on this album, lower tuned, heavy kind of tone. The vocals on this album are absolutely beautiful as well. They do remind me on something very soft but chilling and calm at the same time, something like on a My Bloody Valentine album. And that shoegaze type of influence is all on here on this album, besides the very experimental extremities of something more melodic and less on the complexity and technicality from the first two albums. A lot of the very brief lyrics on the album basically tells us just on some simple messages about the aspect on the ending of human life, but it was not taken into a lot of deeper detail because the music does a lot of the talking on this album, and that's what I love the most about this. The atmosphere of the music really sinks into your brain and eardrums, that it just brings things down into a lot of these spacious and experiencing vibe. And I love it when ambient to some prog metal albums can really do that. And I'll have to say that the rest of the band, from Tony to Hamilton, Michael and Nick, all four members have a lot of massive talent, and their work for this album just so spectacular. The production done by Kurt, as I've said, is just phenomenal. Every single thing about this album sounds crisp and crystal clean, and it's like that the sound of the drums, especially the snare, it's like it's smacking at you all the way through, and the guitars have a mark of distortion that is so distinctive. I cannot really tell you guys how much that the more I play this album, the more it connects with me, because while I really have loved some of the other albums throughout this year so far, Dream Weapon is one of those albums that I have not stopped repeating from the start to the finish at 45 minutes in length. This is an album that is taking you to an atmospheric journey, and if you like what I've been saying from the various genres I've mentioned in this review, definitely check out this album and give Genghis Tron a lot of the acclaim, because while this is a very different album, and for those that loved the earlier stuff previously in their discography, this is one album that you should not miss out on whatsoever here. Everything from the tracks of Pyrocene to Dream Weapon, and even on the instrumental passages of the opener Exit Perfect Mind to Desert Stairs, and the very progressive number of Ritual Circle and Alone in the Heart of the Light, Great Mother. Every track on this album connects and mashes things all in one piece. You know, it's definitely one of these very favourable albums for me that I would maybe consider placing this as one of my top 5 albums of 2021 so far. So that's all I would like to say about Dream Weapon by Genghis Tron. Let me know what you think of this album in the comments down below. I'm going to give this album a very enthusiastic 9 out of 10. This is definitely one of those albums that sets the bar of some very bold and I would say creative and different albums than what you would expect to hear from previous albums from any band whatsoever. But Dream Weapon is absolutely worth of your time to discover a totally new, fresh, and pristine sound of quality music from this band. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.